Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to our global audience. My name is Laurel Grodman. I'm Assistant Dean for Admissions at the Yale School of Management. I'm also a graduate of the Yale SOM MBA class of 2006. I am so pleased to be joined by two individuals today who are deeply involved with the asset management program here at Yale SOM. The first is Professor Toby Moskowitz, who is our faculty director and professor of finance, as well as a principal at AQR Capital. In addition to being a guru of all things investments, Professor Moskowitz also somehow finds time to be an expert in sports analytics. You should check out his many guest appearances on the Freakonomics podcast if you have a chance. Thank you so much for being here today, Toby.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for being here. Thanks, Laurel.
I'm also joined by Arwin Zeissler, who is the program director for the Masters of Asset Management program and a lecturer in the practice of management. Arwin is deeply integrated into the asset management experience and spends a lot of time working with faculty and staff and students to ensure that our program lives up to the very high standards set by the founders. And based on the inaugural class that just graduated this past spring, I'd say he's off to a very successful start. So thank you so much for being here today as well, Arwin.
Thanks, Laurel. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today.
So the three of us greatly appreciate you spending some time with us today to learn more about the asset management program. The program, which is formally called a Master's in Management Studies in Asset Management, is a truly unique program that exists only at Yale. And we're looking forward to sharing more with you about the origins of the program, what makes it distinctive from other finance programs, what kinds of candidates we're looking to bring into the program, and what to expect from the application process. So we've just welcomed our second cohort to the school this fall, and we can also share some perspective on what that experience has been like to date for the students who have gone through the program. So we have about an hour together. I'll be sure to leave some time to take your questions live towards the end of the session. If you do have questions, please use the Q&A function, and we will sort those out and move into answering them towards the end of today's session. I'd also like to note up front that we'll be hosting a variety of online events in the coming months leading up to our application deadline in January. So please be sure to check in on our events page. In particular, I'll call out we regularly host Q&A sessions, which are an opportunity to connect directly with an admissions officer and other members of the asset management community to get your individual questions answered in a smaller meeting format than this one. So before I pass the reins to Professor Moskowitz to walk you through the asset management program and what makes it so distinctive among finance programs, I'm going to just share a brief overview of how this program fits into the larger Yale University and Yale SOM community and what it means to be studying here at Yale. So as a business school, we are very much driven by our mission to educate leaders for business and society. And this means we aim to develop leaders who can think broadly about the challenges that we face in an increasingly complex world and who have the ability to be decision makers in areas that are critical to solving some of the biggest issues that impact markets and economies and communities and governments today. Our mission is really at the core of everything we do across all of our programs, and the members of our community care about being successful in their careers as well as having a positive impact on society at large. The program we'll be speaking about today was created very much with this in mind. So I'd also like to emphasize that when you join the Yale SOM community, you become a member of the broader Yale University community. And all of our programs create numerous opportunities for engagement across campus, both inside and outside of the classroom, which gives you access to some of the sharpest minds in academia across many disciplines, as well as to the resources of a really world-renowned institution. All of our degree programs, including the Masters in Asset Management, allow you to take electives outside of Yale SOM and gives you access to conferences and entrepreneurial resources, cultural events, and guest speakers hosted by Yale. It's really a tremendous opportunity to learn and connect with people across a wide range of disciplines who have different areas of expertise and different ways of thinking. And this range of perspectives can be seen within the suite of Yale SOM academic programs as well. And so while we'll be speaking specifically about the Masters in Asset Management today, the Yale School of Management attracts business leaders from around the globe at various different points in their careers and with numerous areas of expertise. So by coming to Yale, you'll be joining a community of students and faculty and staff who care deeply about the major challenges that we face in business and society today, and who are thinking about those challenges through a wide variety of lenses and perspectives. And so asset management in particular is one field of really remarkable strength at SOM. So in addition to the Masters in Asset Management, we have doctoral programs in business, including a specialization in financial economics. And it's worth noting that some of our asset management professors also teach in this PhD program. Yale SOM, as many of you know, also offers a full-time 2-year MBA, which offers 10 different joint degree options, one of which is the joint MBA and Masters in Asset Management. Some of our MBA students are coming directly from undergraduate programs without full-time work experience, and this is called our Silver Scholars Program, which is also open as a joint degree option with asset management. And all asset management students have opportunity to take MBA electives as part of their curriculum as well. And we'll get into the paths of study for these different options a little bit later on. I'll also call out that we offer an MBA for executives that welcomes professionals from 3 specific industries, asset management being one of them, along with healthcare and sustainability. And unlike the Masters in Asset Management program that we'll be focusing on today, where students haven't necessarily had any prior exposure to the field of asset management, the professionals in the executive MBA program average about 13 years of experience, and they are preparing for roles in senior leadership, having already gained experience in asset management. So having a deep bench of programs that are focused on the field means the school is able to attract top faculty and offer a depth of courses and programming that might not otherwise be available in such a specific area. So that's really a benefit to those in the asset management program. There are a number of other degree programs here at Yale SOM, and what I'll say is having all of these degree programs housed within the School of Management just brings an incredibly rich array of opportunities and exposure to our students, no matter what your specific area of focus might be. So at this point, we'll start focusing specifically on the asset management program. I'll pass the mic to Professor Moskowitz to hear more about the program and his role in founding this groundbreaking initiative that we're really proud to have here at Yale.
So thank you, Laurel. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'm Toby Moskowitz. I've been a professor here since, visiting 2015, officially in 2016. Prior to this, I was at the University of Chicago for 18 years and worked with, Gene Fama and, coming from that world. And the reason I mention that is because I want to talk just a bit about the genesis of this program. Originally, so this was an idea that I had, for more than a decade at the University of Chicago, was to bridge the gap between theory and practice and offer just a 1-year a 1-year program dedicated to asset management and investing. And the problem was, and the reason I thought of that is I've been working with AQR Capital, as Laurel mentioned, for about 15 years now, and I'm a partner in the firm. And I found it incredibly valuable to think about how theory and practice went back and forth, and to think about all the tools that we learn as an academic and how to apply them in practice. And how what I noticed at AQR and other firms was we would hire really talented students who'd come in but didn't know anything about asset management, didn't know anything about finance. They were well-tooled in mathematics, statistics, computer science, but we ended up spending 1.5 to 2 years training them on, asset management techniques, and many of them would leave after that. And it wasn't just at AQR. I, as a professor, had done this at various institutions as well, Citadel, Goldman Sachs, where professors like myself were brought in to help train students. And so I thought a program that was dedicated to train people to do this would just give them a leg up and let them be productive from day one in the firm. So the problem is that at Chicago, I never had, I could do the academic side of things, and I know a little bit about practice, but I never had a partner who could help me fill out the curriculum and provide the right people who could study the practice of finance. So long story short, I'm here at Yale, and they're trying to get me to accept the offer. And the dean at the time, Andrew Metrick, engineered a lunch for me to meet with David Swenson, the famous Yale chief investment officer for the Yale Endowment and the pioneer of the Yale model, If you're online today, you know who David Swenson is. So I don't need to say who he was. And I mentioned this idea to David because we were just talking casually at lunch, and he turned to me and he said, I've been thinking something should exist like this for many years. He goes, why has nobody done this? And I said, well, there's not really a good partnership, on the practical side. And David said, if you want to be a partner, I would love to do this. I'll help you design it and everything. And it was just a wonderful partnership from the very beginning. And David and I worked for the better part of 4 years, close to 5 years, designing the curriculum, thinking about the right people. I would have, often weekly meetings with him in his office. He was incredibly generous with his time. And we were very proud of the program we designed. And, we're all sad that he never got to see it come to fruition as he passed away last April. But we're very proud of the way it's designed. And for those of you that know anything about David Swenson's legacy and his ideas, you'll see it throughout the program. And the best way to describe it is the program is designed with a discipline and rigor for strong analytical analysis to the problems of asset management. So David himself was a PhD in economics from Yale. So we apply the tools of academia to the science of asset management. But in addition to that, and David was pioneering in developing a whole new model for endowments and institutions to run money. But in addition to that, David's legacy was also one about fiduciary responsibility and ethical responsibility and doing the right thing for society. And he always had this famous line, which was, what's great about the business of asset management is it's one of the few places where you can do good and do well at the same time. There's no question that this is a lucrative field where you can have a great career and if you want to make good money, but importantly, it's incredibly valuable to society that we allocate resources to the right places. And if you do this responsibly and honestly, then it can be just an unbelievably rewarding profession. And so I hope if you come here, if you apply and you come here, you'll see that. And Arwin will talk about the curriculum in just a little bit once I'm done. But you'll see that throughout the program. So, and the other thing you'll see in the program, I think, is a mixture of courses that come from a theoretical perspective, from the academic side, and then practical courses. And not only did David help design the curriculum with me, but we brought in people who practice this for a living, who are teaching courses. They're skilled teachers as well, but they're running money in real time. That's their day job, and they're going to talk about how they do this, how they apply the tools that you're going to learn in this curriculum, and how you can have a wonderful career in asset management. And I would say the goal here is we're hoping to train you guys to launch you into a career in this business. And I think you'll see lots of elements of not just skills, but also just general ways of practicing, of thinking about how do you launch a career in asset management and do it the right way. So if we go to the next slide, what is the program? It's a 2-semester, 9-month full-time program. It is STEM eligible, okay? And obviously it's going to be highly quantitative, but also, I should also mention, I'm a quant. I do, lots of statistics, lots of math to solve asset management problems. David Swenson was trained as a quant with his PhD in economics, but also practiced more the fundamental side as well. And you're going to see both elements of that in this program. We want students to be exposed to both. And we'll see students segment off into private equity, more fundamental based analysis, as well as those that want to go the quant direction. It's really designed for a full spectrum of asset management roles. We'll see some of our students who will go and work in an endowment or a pension fund on the buy side, as well as on the sell side, working for a hedge fund or a money manager. Again, you'll get a full exposure to the spectrum of job opportunities. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the goal of the program is to really fill a demand for finance training and asset management that students sorely don't get. And there's really no other program. There is no other program in the world devoted to asset management. And I think you'll see from the curriculum, this is different than a typical master's in finance program, which would be the closest thing to this, but it's really quite different. And it's again a really nice marriage of the top finance scholars in the world, along with a truly unique curriculum designed with some of the top practitioners in the world that have either worked with the Yale Endowments Office or work in the quantitative industry. If we go to the next slide, who's the program for? As I mentioned, early career individuals. Our ideal are students who are interested in this industry, but don't necessarily know that much about it, that they're talented, they're analytical, they're technical, but they want to learn about this, and we want to launch them into the asset management industry. We really think of this as a way to launch your career in this industry. It's a wonderful career that you can have. So obviously we're looking for strong quantitative and analytical backgrounds. That doesn't mean you're all going to be quantitative researchers. In fact, I think, I would say it's probably split about half and half in terms of the interests that the people have, but you will be exposed to all of it. And so the idea here is you don't need to come in with a lot of background in finance or economics. In fact, I prefer that you've never seen some of the things that I'm going to talk about in class because I want you to learn it the right way. And so we're a little biased here. The clean slate is good. But if you have some of that background, that's also welcome too. But we're talking about early career individuals launching into this industry. If we go to the next slide. Now, how is the Yale program different from other programs? Well, as I mentioned, I don't think there's any other program in the world dedicated to asset management, and in particular, the theory and practice of asset management. You can look at other Masters in Finance programs. They have some elements of asset management courses, but they're not dedicated to it. And you won't find a lot of practitioners teaching in those programs, telling you how to do things. As an example, we have a course taught by one of the partners at Bridgewater that shows you how to do a request for funding proposal and how to size a strategy. After all the things that you learned in the first half of this program, Osman Nabanoglu shows you how to actually take that to practice and think about competition, think about how to attract clients, think about how to write up a proposal, things that you're not going to get until you're on the job, but you're going to get that here before you even get that job, which is going to just give you a leg up in your organization. We even have some courses that are jointly taught by Yale faculty and leading institutional investors. One of our courses last year, the ESG course, is taught by a tenure track faculty member, as well as Lukasz Pomorski, who runs ESG strategies at AQR Capital. And it was a really nice merger of those two worlds. And we have a number of courses like that. I think if you want to look at the curriculum, you'll see that it's really a unique blend of courses that you really can't find anywhere else. And here's just a sampling of some of those listed, and Arwin will talk a bit more about those. Another unique feature of our program, and something that David was very passionate about, is our asset management colloquium. And here what we do is we bring to campus some of the world's leaders in asset management, ranging from those that run endowments to those that run hedge funds, to even potentially some regulators and the full gamut of in asset management. And David was very generous in making connections for us with some of the top investors. So, for instance, already this year we're going to have Cliff Asness coming in another month, the co-founder and managing principal of AQR Capital. We had Dean Takahashi last year, David Swenson's longtime partner at the Yale Endowment. Paula Valent, who runs Rockefeller. We just had Nicole Arabaldi last week, who used to run all private equity at Credit Suisse and now is with Oak Hill. So just an amazing set of speakers that only you get exposure to. In fact, Arwin and I spend most of our time when our speakers are coming telling lots of other students that they can't come. This is exclusively just for the asset management students. It gives you a nice intimate setting to interact with some of the world's leaders in asset management, talk about their careers and what they're thinking about. We had Bob Litterman too a couple of weeks ago as well, which was a real treat. As Laurel mentioned, there's options for joint degrees, and we can go through those details later. And then just the final slide before I turn it over to Arwin. Just in terms of what we're trying to do here is we really think this is a very good substitute, or at least an enormous boost up from what you will get at any investment firm. The way things work, certainly I can tell you at AQR, is we hire these very smart undergrads, like I said, and we end up training them for the next 18 months about how to do finance and asset management. Here, you're going to get that intense training in your first year, and it's much more intense, in fact, than what we do at AQR and what's done at these other firms. And the training is not just going to be about technical ability and science. You're also going to get exposure to ethical and fiduciary considerations. We have a wonderful course taught by Lauren Kaplan, who runs compliance over at the Yale Endowment, that talks about the regulatory environment and things you have to look out for and be conscious of. as well as a course in the law school by John Macy that talks about fiduciary responsibility and some of the pitfalls that you can get into. And again, coming back to David Swenson's philosophy that you can do good and do well at the same time, this is our opportunity to show you that you can do things right in the asset management industry and have just a wonderful career and really make a difference in the world managing other people's money. And I think it's a great program. I encourage you to apply, and I encourage you to come if you get in. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Arwin, who's going to talk a bit more about the details of what we actually do here. Thanks.
Thanks, Toby. So definitely, in addition to what I'm going to say today over the next 10 to 15 minutes or so, I would encourage all of you, please go to the asset management website, and you can find out a lot more information, both very helpful admissions tips for all the different parts of the application, and Laurel will talk about that more in a few minutes, but we also have a lot more information about the curriculum in addition to what you're going to see here on this slide. The big picture of our curriculum is we've decided to have about half the classes be required classes and half the classes be elective courses. So the basic idea here is that when you come in, we mentioned it's a 2-semester program. In the first semester, you'll be taking mostly required lecture courses. And the idea here is we want to build a common toolbox. We want all of you to have a common set of tools, a common set of skills that you'll be able to use both in the second semester of the program, but then more importantly, throughout your career. So we have some classes are half semester classes, others are basically 2 half semesters, but in total we have 7 half semester classes that are required. And you can see the examples that we give there, very fundamental investment topics like asset pricing theory, behavioral finance, business ethics. This speaks to the point that Toby made earlier, that both he and David Swenson built into the program this idea of fiduciary responsibility and ethical considerations. So we actually have a required half semester course in business ethics to really bring that home to all of you. And then also required coursework in econometrics, and Toby himself teaches the quantitative investing class. So again, required classes, the most of these required classes take place in the fall semester, and these are generally taught by the tenured finance faculty here at Yale SOM, who are among the leading researchers in their field, in their discipline. One interesting piece of the curriculum, one thing we added this year was that even in the fall semester, you have an opportunity to take an elective class. And the feedback we received from the students is that they really enjoy that ability to start to customize their education already in the fall semester. Then when we move over to the spring semester, we almost like turning the coin over, because in the spring semester, the focus changes to elective classes. So in the spring, you'll only have 1 required course, and the rest will all be elective courses. And this is really where you can customize your education, customize it based on your own career aspirations. So as we've said, at different points in the webinar, some students are going to be very interested in fundamental analysis, others in more quantitative strategies. And we offer a wide range of electives to let you pursue your passion, to let you pursue your career aspirations. There's a great many electives that we designed specifically for the asset management program. And you'll see these electives listed here, things like a course on advanced derivatives, on ESG investing, which is, of course, one of the hottest topics right now. Specifically designed electives for fixed income, hedge fund strategies. Toby already mentioned a course on law and regulation taught by Lauren Kaplan, who works as the general counsel for the Yale Endowment Fund. I think Toby also mentioned the portfolio management class. So one of the things that we're really excited about in the past, this was a 1 half semester class in portfolio management, but starting this year, we're going to extend that to be 2 half semesters, basically a full semester course where students are managing basically divided into small groups of 4 or 5, managing a mock portfolio and getting feedback both from the professor, but also from other experts in the industry. And then a brand new venture capital and private equity course that we're going to be piloting this spring semester. But in addition, there's not just the electives we've designed for the program. We also really try to take advantage of everything that's available here at SOM and across the wider Yale community. So you also have the ability to take MBA electives in things like financial crises, financial history, capital markets, a number of other courses, also in entrepreneurship, and courses across Yale. So what we find is that some students are very interested in building out their education, furthering their education in things like computer science, economics, math, statistics. And of course, Yale is strong in all these areas. And we really try to give you that ability, as I say, to customize your education really across the university as well. So again, you can see sort of approximately half required lecture courses, half elective lecture courses. The fall is mostly required, the spring is mostly elective. And again, as Toby had mentioned earlier, in these spring elective courses, many or most of these actually are taught or co-taught by practitioners. Though they're doing their work during the day, and then they're coming here in the evening, the late afternoons and the evenings, to basically share with you the latest and greatest theories and practices that they've been using, in some cases that very day. Another key component is the Asset Management Colloquium. As Toby mentioned, we have leading institutional investors come throughout the year to speak. And we do other things as part of the colloquium as well. So in a couple of weeks, the colloquium speakers will actually be a panel of alums from the first year of the program, talking about their experience, sharing their insights about the program, but also sharing what their first few months in their new asset management positions have been like. And then the last piece of the curriculum is the practical experience requirement. So we do ask all students to complete a 40-hour requirement. Most do this through a typical internship, but a number of students will also complete this by helping professors with research. And this practical experience requirement is then something that all of you would fulfill after the fall semester is over. So if we could move to the next slide, please. Thanks, Laurel. So one of the things that we're very excited about is a joint degree option. So you can consider doing both the Master of Business Administration and the MMS in Asset Management. If you're interested in doing the joint degree, again, Laurel will talk a little bit more about this later, but the basic idea is you will need to apply to both programs separately and be admitted to both programs. So that, I guess, would be sort of the bad news part of this joint degree option. But the good news part, the wonderful part about it is it's the same length and the same cost as if you just did the MBA by itself. But when you graduate, you would graduate with 2 degrees. So our experience thus far has been that most students come to the program directly from undergraduate or maybe with just a year or so of experience. And in that case, you could consider the Silver Scholars MBA and Asset Management joint degree. So our Silver Scholars program, as Laurel mentioned briefly before, is for students who have either no experience or just a very small amount of full-time work experience, a year or 2. And that ends up being a 3-year program. In year 1, you complete the MBA core curriculum. You're actually taking classes with the MBA students. Then in your 2nd year, you go and you get some extra work experience by doing a year-long extended internship. And then after that extended internship, you come back to SOM in year 3. And in year 3, you basically use the MBA electives to then fulfill the requirements of the asset management program. For those of you who might be interested in the joint degree option and you have more experience, if you have the amount of work experience typical of an MBA program, typically say 5 to 7 years approximately, in that case, your dual degree would be the same 2-year path that other MBA students take here at Yale. So again, in year 1, you would complete the MBA core curriculum, the same classes with the same students. And then in year 2, you would come back right away. And again, you'd use your MBA electives to meet the asset management requirements. So again, it's a great option. We've had, I think maybe half a dozen or so students did this in the first year of the program. We have a small number of students doing it again this year. And as I mentioned, the key thing really to keep in mind is that it's the same length and the same cost as if you just did the MBA by itself. but at the end you would have the 2 degrees. You'd have the generalist MBA degree, plus you would have the focus degree in asset management. So hopefully something that many of you will consider and then apply to both of the programs. All right, and then moving ahead. So one thing you'll learn, Laurel kind of set the context for this by talking, broadly about the resources available here at Yale, as well as resources available more specifically at SOM. And you'll discover that it's a key facet of the program, is really how integrated the asset management program is to the SOM community and even to the wider Yale community. So you'll be part of the SOM student community. There'll be MBAs, as I mentioned, you'll have that chance to take MBA elective courses where you'll be rubbing elbows with MBAs. We have the executive MBA program, which has an asset management track. And one of the things that we're trying to really build on is to sort of build the relationships between the master's program in asset management, the one that you're learning about today, and the executive MBA students in asset management. So, for example, we'll have a executive MBA student, hopefully on this alumni panel that I mentioned that's happening, that we're going to hold for our students. We're going to have a joint colloquium session with the executive MBA asset management students, networking events and social events that bring the 2 groups together, which is important because the executive MBA students, as Laurel mentioned, they have about 10 to 15 years of experience, most commonly. So those are the people you could think of as being your potential supervisor or manager someday. So we're trying to do our as good a job as we can to foster the connection between the 2. And then we also have this PhD program here. It has a financial economics track. Again, some of the professors will teach in both programs, and it's another way that you're not just here as an isolated group of asset management students. You really have an opportunity to connect with those studying finance and asset management throughout SOM. As I mentioned earlier, and it's worth mentioning again, that we have the electives we've created specifically for the asset management program. But in addition to those, you have the opportunity to take selected MBA electives and even courses across Yale with approval from Toby, our faculty director. And we saw this last year, students taking advantage and taking courses in computer science, in economics, in math, in statistics. A handful of students took courses at the law school. Obviously, Yale is a world-renowned institution, has top scholars and researchers across all disciplines. And so if you're here, it's a wonderful opportunity. I would encourage everyone to take at least one course outside of SOM just to see what the rest of Yale is about. You'll receive ongoing support from the SOM Career Development Office. Just this past June, we hired Valerie Fred, who I believe is watching the session today as well. And Valerie starts working with asset management students during the summer months in June or July. So your first contact actually comes with career development. We realize that's an important goal for all of you. And we realize, of course, that 9 months is a very short interval of time. So Valerie and her colleagues in the Career Development Office start to work with you before you ever even take courses. And if you do apply and decide to come, which we hope you do, then there'll be sessions during the summer to already help you prepare resumes and cover letters and interview tips and think about basically, what it is you want to do when you grow up, so to speak. Valerie and her team can help you kind of refine that thought process. And you have the ability to interact with SOM faculty and practitioners. So we have the International Center for Finance here, and most of the finance faculty are involved in this International Center for Finance. The ICF, as we refer to it, houses a lot of historical and current data collections. They hold a number of webinars and seminars and speakers events throughout the course of the year. They have one of our students right now is assisting ICF faculty members with research. So there's a very great opportunity to get involved with that particular group here. And then, of course, the Yale Investments Office, which we all know, Toby started by talking giving you a little bit of the history of how he and David Swenson kind of came together and developed this idea. So now under the leadership of Matt Mendelson, the Yale Investments Office is sort of forging a new path forward. Matt was one of our colloquium speakers last year. I believe he was also a guest speaker in several of the different elective courses that we had last year. So as you can see, there's not, again, you're not isolated here. You're really joining a welcoming community that has a very wide range of resources that's available for you. All right, and then I just want to say a little bit, again, some of the outcomes. What you'll find is that, of course, our first students just graduated in May, and a common question that we get from prospective applicants is, well, what were the job placement numbers like? So for that, I need to counsel a little bit of patience, because the standard for a program like this is we wait until 6 months after graduation, and then we begin to collect and publish the data. But I can give you a little bit of some information just to give you a little bit of additional context about what we saw with the initial set of graduates. And we saw really that the graduates took positions that are located really throughout the United States, as well as in China and Canada. And even here in the United States, we sort of highlight the fact these jobs weren't just all in New York City or all in say, California. Here on the East Coast, we had students accept jobs here in Connecticut, New York, New Jersey. Some of you may know that there's a emerging financial center in Charlotte, North Carolina. We actually had 3 or 4 students who are now working in Charlotte. I think 2 of the students are in fact working right across the street from one another, and are, I think, live in the same apartment building even. So it's been sort of a great connection that they've been able to carry forward. And I have a student working in Florida. In the middle of the country, we have students working in Chicago, in the Metro Detroit area of Michigan, and in Houston, Texas. And on the West Coast, we have several students in California and 1 or 2 students even in Colorado. So you can see really in this initial group, even just, and this is only the information we have so far. Like I said, we're not yet at that 6 months after graduation, but you can see that there's the wide range of opportunities by location, and then a very wide range of job functions. So again, just to look at some selected initial placements, quite a few students who are buy-side and sell-side analysts, many who are investment managers. We have some students in private equity, some students in venture capital, some in sales and trading, commercial banking, consulting, risk management. So again, this points to what Toby pointed out, that we really conceive of this program as kind of covering the entire spectrum of asset management, from the Warren Buffett style investor who wants to do fundamental research, diving into company financial statements, all the way to very, very quantitative strategies, even at the other end of like a market making strategy. One of the students works in sales and trading in Chicago essentially for a market making firm, which is a very short term, very quantitative strategy. So we've been very, very excited, very pleased to see the wide range of opportunities that this initial cohort has been fulfilling. And this together with, as we build the alumni network, with now that we have Valerie's to support our students, we expect that future career outcomes are going to be even stronger year by year by year as the program gets more well known. And then lastly, some students consider using the program as a springboard to a PhD in finance. So we had one of our students last year graduated, and she is now recently, well, 2-3 months in, I guess by now, doing a PhD in finance at the Wharton School in Pennsylvania. And I know in the current cohort, there's also several students who are strongly considering going for a PhD. And our program is a perfect springboard to do that. And so, those interested in a PhD, they would use the electives to customize perhaps a little bit differently than someone looking for a career in industry. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a better idea of what to expect in terms of the curriculum, the resources available to you, the outcomes, at least some of the outcomes from our initial cohort. Happy to have had the chance to present this to you. Now I want to turn it back over to Laurel, and she'll give you some information and advice about the admissions process.
Thank you so much, Arwin, and thank you, Toby, as well. So as we mentioned earlier, we just welcomed our second cohort earlier this fall, and this gives you a little snapshot of who this class is. We welcomed 43 students and expect the class to continue to be roughly that size, probably just slightly bigger in the years to come. But obviously, as has been described, this is an intimate experience and a lot of individual access you get to practitioners. So this is never going to be the size of our MBA program, for instance. It's a really international group, 11 countries of citizenship, students coming from places like South Korea, Italy, Mexico, India, Pakistan, the UK, China, Canada, and the United States. We are very proud of the fact that this cohort is 51% women. That is a unique class feature in a management school, and so we're very happy to see that. This gives you a sense as well of the distribution of work experience. So you can see that about 2/3 of our students came into the program directly out of undergrad or with no prior full-time work experience. And then the balance are roughly divided between those who have a fairly minimal amount, 1 to 2 years of work experience, and then those who have more than 2 years of work experience, which include oftentimes our joint degree students. So I have an asterisk next to our two. So we do currently have 2 students in the asset management cohort who are pursuing the dual degree with the MBA. We actually admitted and have enrolled, I think, another maybe 4 or 5 students who applied to both programs last year. And as Arwin mentioned, when you're pursuing the dual degree, you start in the MBA core and then move on to the asset management program in your second year. So we have, like I said, a number of those students who are currently in their core of the MBA program this year and who will join next year's cohort of the asset management group. Okay, so before we open for Q&A, I would like to offer a few words on the application process. Hopefully you've all been convinced that this is a wonderful place for you to study and are now thinking about how do I position myself to get in. So I'll be very clear here, hopefully. When it comes down to it, we are looking for 3 things in the application process. We're looking for your academic preparedness with a particular lens of assessing your quantitative preparedness for obvious reasons. We're looking at your professional impact and potential as demonstrated through your work experience, if you've had it, through your extracurricular involvement and your personal interests. And then third, we're looking for your desire to make an impact in the field of asset management immediately after graduating from the program and then beyond. And so each element of the application that you'll see here really aids the admissions committee in our assessment of one or more of these dimensions. And we look at them holistically to pull in the information we need, given each one of your own unique academic histories, professional experience, and personal backgrounds, which means there's no one ideal candidate for the asset management program, but rather that students can come from a variety of academic and professional backgrounds and find success within the program. So I'll try to touch briefly upon each of those 3 areas and what we're thinking about within that evaluation process. So academically, we're looking to set candidates up for success in what you can tell is an academically rigorous program. And this means that we are looking for evidence of strong academic performance in your studies to date, no matter what particular area of study that might be. So there are no particular majors that are preferable to others. We're looking for your evidence of intellectual curiosity and exposure to different areas in your study is viewed as a positive. And while the program clearly isn't focused exclusively on quantitative concepts, a certain level of preparedness in quantitative subjects, it will give you the foundation you really need to dive into the coursework. So we will look to understand what that exposure is that you've had to date. So you may have studied finance or econ or math, and naturally you would have had a good deal of quantitative exposure in your curriculum, but it's also possible that you studied something like engineering or chemistry, or even earned a liberal arts focused degree, but that you've had exposure to statistics or some applied math along the way. So we're looking at all of these different backgrounds and then synthesizing the different pieces. On a tactical level, what we're actually looking at is your transcripts, so not just your GPA at the end, but how you perform throughout, what sorts of courses you've selected. We will ask you to detail some information specifically about your quantitative course prep. and as well as your programming preparation. And this isn't necessarily in the form of formal coursework. It could be self-study, it could be certificate programs, but we're interested again in the broad range of exposure that you've gotten to date. We're also looking at your GMAT or your GRE score. Test scores are never the sole indicator of how you're going to perform in a program, but they can be helpful, particularly if you don't have as deep a quantitative background. And we know that testing is more generally predictive, both on the quantitative and verbal side of success in management programs. So that's one element that we look at. And we'll also request 2 letters of recommendation from you, one of them coming from an academic setting. And so that will give us an additional window into your academic performance. In terms of assessing your professional impact and potential, we're meeting you where you are. So some of you will be coming directly from your undergraduate experience, and so necessarily you're not going to have full-time work, but you've likely engaged in either professional internships or academic research, as well as extracurriculars and your personal pursuits. Those with full-time work experience will want to highlight those experience. As it's been mentioned a few times, our target for this program is early career, but what that really means is early in your asset management career. So if you've gotten experience in another field but are looking to make a pivot, we're still interested in knowing how you performed in a professional setting in that other context. And your interests and your pursuits outside of finance or other more quantitatively focused areas is important to us as well. Even in the most quantitative asset management role, your ability to think strategically, to connect the dots across different industries or different disciplines, and your ability to communicate and collaborate with others will be critical. So we're interested in seeing where you commit your time and how you operate and interact within a variety of settings. So in order to put this together, we're looking at your resume, where you're detailing all of this information. We're looking at that second letter of recommendation, which is hopefully coming from either a professional or a more activity or extracurricular based setting. And we will actually ask you to detail the activities that you've been engaged in, both within your undergraduate time of study and if you've graduated, what you're doing beyond. And we're considering all of this in our assessment. And then lastly, I mentioned your interest in the field of asset management. So as you've heard, this program is really distinctive among master's degrees in finance due to its unique focus on the theory and practice of asset management. So we want to understand what drives your interest in this field and how you envision the pursuit of those interests will play out for you in the career that you launch after completing the program. So we have an essay question that directly addresses this, and you'll have a chance to detail, again, that interest in your pursuits here. We'll take a look at the types of activities and experiences that you've pursued to date. And again, it's not a requirement that you've had experience in asset management or roles in asset management, but if you have, this is certainly kind of evidence of your interest in this area. And we also have an opportunity to hear more about this in your interview. So the interview will actually touch upon a number of different areas that we're assessing, but it's a good place to mention that the interview is by invitation only. And we also won't necessarily interview everyone that we admit, but we'll try to do this as much as possible. And the interview itself is conducted by a member of the admissions committee, and it's an opportunity for us to delve further into your background and interests. I do want to make sure to leave time for questions, so I'm not going to go into as much detail around some of the other application elements of the application. We'll host a number of other events, and some of them specifically focused on the application process, where I'm more than happy to go into detail about the video questions and the behavioral assessment and some of the other features of the application that may be a little bit distinctive here. But I will call out, we have one application deadline on January 11th. And so after the deadline, our admissions committee will begin reviewing applications and start sending out interview invitations a few weeks later for those who will be interviewed. And keep in mind, an invitation can come at any point throughout the rounds, to make sure you're regularly checking the email that you've associated with your application. And we will let all candidates know about their decision by on March 28th. One other thing I'd like to mention is all admitted applicants will be automatically considered for merit-based scholarships. So no separate essay or application is required. Scholarship recipients are chosen based on their exemplification of the exact same 3 admissions factors I noted earlier and the perspective that they'll add to the class and the community. And you'll be notified of your scholarship award at the same time that you're notified of admissions. So with that, I will pause and open it up for questions. Again, if you do have questions, and I see we have quite a few loaded up already, please submit those through the Q&A function. We're happy to answer questions about the program, the community, the admissions process. I encourage you to keep those questions relatively broad and relevant to as many people in the audience as possible. If you do have specific questions about your candidacy, however, I'll put up our asset management inbox email here. We're happy to connect with you on an individual basis if you have particular questions about your candidacy. But from there, I'm going to stop sharing so we can see what questions have been coming through. So give me just a moment. Melissa Kropp, who is our Assistant Director of Admissions, is working behind the scenes to collect your questions. So let's kick it off with, as a student with less quantitative coursework, what are the quantitative expectations in the application, and will I be at a disadvantage? And how does the program provide support throughout the year for students with less quantitative experience? So I'd love to hear from Toby or Arwin, what are some of the courses that you think are, or the types of exposure that are really helpful to have prior to enrolling in the program? And what do you do if you don't necessarily have as deep exposure in those areas?
Sure, I'll jump in here. So just based on the based on what the professors are covering in their courses, and based on feedback we've had from the students ourselves, that initial set of students, certainly calculus is very important to have had at least 2, ideally 3 semesters of calculus. Linear algebra. I know Toby in his course uses plenty of linear algebra right in his very first lecture. And we also find it's good to have statistics, at least a couple of courses in statistics. But of course, nowadays, most every degree program, I think, includes at least 1 or 2 statistics courses as an undergraduate. But that's important. And one of the core classes is an econometrics class that builds heavily on statistics knowledge. In addition, so that's sort of the math piece. But in addition, it'd be great to have had some prior coding experience. Typically in one of the open source programs like Python or R. Again, students write in the very first semester, the first homework assignments actually write computer code. And that's, it's involved, it's integral to a lot of areas of asset management. Now, that doesn't mean that you need to have taken all of those math classes at the time you apply. Certainly, for those of you who are still undergraduates, it's something to consider. Depending on where you're at, could you take that, an additional math class or 2 in your final semester? But we also, this year, we added a summer self-study program that includes free online resources in calculus through multivariable, linear algebra, 2 statistics courses, and 5 modules on Python coding. So, certainly if there's 1 or more of those math areas, or perhaps on the coding that you don't have all that work, that you shouldn't think, oh, you can't apply. The real idea is that you would get to that level before the first day of courses. And like I said, you might do that through your remaining undergraduate studies, or perhaps you take an extra math class or 2 at a local community college, and all of that together with this summer self-study program will have you prepared and ready for the first day of classes. So that's kind of our thought process here is, we will kind of, as Laurel said, meet you where you're ready and kind of give you the tools so that based on what you've studied before, plus the summer self-study, to get you ready when classes start September 1st.
Yeah, and I would just add, there are plenty of students who don't have strong technical backgrounds that once they did the summer work and they've come to class, I've seen it this year, they've said they've been able to keep up and they're learning a lot. So I would say the only thing is you'll have to put in some work in the summer, but everybody's doing it, and then that that'll be it's been beneficial to the students that we have now that said they didn't have strong technical backgrounds. They seem to be doing just fine.
Thank you. This is a question about the recruitment process, and I'll add, we'll aim to have a dedicated career-focused session with Valerie in the coming months, where we can dive into some of these questions in more depth. But question here, how do students balance workload and recruitment, and when is the recruitment process most intensive for an asset management student? And I'll add to that, what have you seen as some of the main drivers for the students who have been most successful in their career search? I'd say it looks as though just even based on their preliminary results, we've really had incredible outcomes for our students. But to the extent there are things that you think students have done that have allowed them to drive those outcomes, I think that'd be helpful to hear about as well.
Sure. So I'd say time management is, of course, very important. In terms of the course load, we do tend to think that our fall semester, which is primarily required courses, does tend to be a little, for that reason, a little more time consuming, a little more difficult than the coursework in the spring. Much of the recruiting process also takes place in the fall, but what we learned right away in the first year is that the recruiting really takes place throughout the entire year. So it's not like in some programs, some of you may know from MBA programs or certain career paths where the recruiting is condensed into a single 4 to 6 week period in September to early October. Certainly there's more recruiting that takes place sort of throughout the fall semester, but really the events take place throughout the entire year. And the student, in terms of who was most successful, a lot of it is taking sort of balancing students looking through, through personal networks that they might have, professional networks, but also taking advantage of the resources that the Career Development Office has. That's the main thing. As I mentioned, you'll be working with our Career Development Office beginning in the summer months, and they're there to support you throughout the entire year with others working behind the scenes to generate and to further boost employer interest. And so it's really dedication that you need to spend some time on your own looking for work, but also making sure to take advantage of the large wealth of career development resources that are available to you. That's sort of the key to success, and good time management skills, as I said.
Yeah, I'd echo what Arwin said, which is it's like any endeavor. The more you put into it, the students that were the most successful are the ones that used every bit of resources they had. Every resource Yale had to offer, our CDO office, including coaching, as well as networking, and then doing a lot on their own too. So just the more you pursue it and the harder you work at it, those have been the most successful cases. And we offer those resources, so take advantage of them.
Great, thank you both. I'm going to knock out a few quick admissions questions here. A question around whether admissions is considered on a rolling basis. Is there benefit to submitting now to be considered sooner? I can absolutely promise you we will not look at a single application prior to January 11th. And then we will be fast and furious for the month, or the 2.5 month period that comes after that to review everyone and release all of those decisions on March 28th. So those are firm dates. There's no advantage to rushing an application. I encourage you to take as much time as you need to put together the best application that you can. Another question around dates and applications. What's the last date that I can take my GMAT or GRE to submit for this application cycle? So I highly, highly encourage you to have your test taken prior to the application deadline. You will self-report your scores. We'll verify them if you're admitted and enroll, but you have the ability to report those scores as soon as you receive them. So you can take it as close to the deadline as you'd like. You can consider taking or retaking a test after the deadline. I cannot guarantee that we will be able to review any additional information that comes in after the deadline. We do our best to integrate any new information that we get, but I'd very much encourage you to plan ahead and have that test taken in advance of the deadline, though it doesn't need to be particularly far in advance of it. Question around what are some of the most popular electives that students take during the spring? Arwin, I know you mentioned a couple of the areas of coursework that people take outside of the School of Management. When it comes to the electives, either specially developed through the asset management program or maybe some of the MBA electives, what have you seen to be some of the most well-subscribed ones?
Well, we did actually collect data on this as well, and I know the ESG investing course was incredibly popular. That's, of course, one of the most important topics, areas of consideration in the investment landscape right now. And the portfolio management class taught, as Toby said, by one of the partners at Bridgewater. A lot of students, I think, just Bridgewater has a certain, is very well known, or the largest hedge fund. And so being able to learn portfolio management from, a senior leader at Bridgewater is just a wonderful opportunity that students took advantage of. And I imagine even more so we'll do this year, since that's the course I mentioned that's now been expanded out to a full semester.
Great. I want to be mindful of the time. Arwin, Toby, thank you so much for joining us today. I think this was a really helpful and informative session, hopefully, for everyone joining us. As I mentioned, we will continue to have a variety of events coming up over the next couple of months, some of them specifically focused on the admissions process. Hopefully, we'll get an opportunity to hear directly from some of our students who are going through the program. As I mentioned, we'll hope to have a more focused, career-oriented session. So please do make sure to keep an eye out for those. And if you do have individual questions, maybe we can put in either into the Q&A or the chat, once again, the asset management email inbox, and we'd be happy to engage with you individually on any of those questions you might have. But thank you once again to all of our participants, to Arwin and Toby, and we're looking forward to hearing from many of you through the application process in the coming months. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.
Good luck,
Thanks, Laura.
everyone.
Thanks, Toby. Thanks, Melissa.
Thanks, everybody.